Okay, so you are a supporter of a Green New Deal. For people who are not familiar with that, what are some of the core components of that deal?
Yeah, so we call it a Green New Deal because Americans were promised for generations that we live in a world that has clean air, clean water, that we're able to pursue happiness and carry out with liberty. But unfortunately, for so many across the nation, particularly in more vulnerable communities, communities of color, that's not happening. Like here in Hawaii, climate change is no longer a future threat. It's affecting us now. If you go to Waikiki, there's stairs that used to go down to the beach, and like just the top two stairs are above the water. The rest is just submerged. Within my son's lifetime, he's 2 years old. By the year 2100, we're going to see a 3-foot sea level rise, which means the neighborhood he grew up in will be completely underwater. So,
Wow.
these effects are happening now, and climate scientists are saying we have about 15 years to take drastic action in order to solve it. And it's going to take a lot more than just reinstating the Paris Climate Accord. So the Green New Deal, as far as I'm concerned, is going to be moving towards a 100% renewable energy future by the year 2035. So that's going to be transitioning away from fossil fuel cars that see popping up on the screen.
Hmm.
By 2030, phasing out single-use plastics, and rooftop solar, making incentives for that, and ending all those ridiculous pipelines that are being proposed for fossil fuels all across America. And really, we point to China and other places, but America is still the biggest culprit when it comes to pollution and carbon emissions. So in order to make this happen and make sure that we're not just displacing people's jobs all over the nation, we're going to institute a federal job guarantee. That's an issue that a lot of more progressive candidates have been talking about this time around. But it's a perfect policy in order to make sure that a lot of these people that worked in coal and oil will have a smooth transition and actually better jobs in advanced energy.
I'm glad that you mentioned the federal jobs guarantee, because whenever we talk about taking any sort of drastic action when it comes to pollution or especially climate change, the critique that comes back generally from the right, although not always, is that this is going to harm economic growth. It's going to cost jobs. It's going to all of that. So how do you respond to that? How do you convince workers, like actual people who'd be affected by these policies and will be affected by climate change, that actually doing something about it is beneficial to them directly?
Yeah, well, first of all, what's really going to harm economic growth is people getting driven out of their communities because of climate change. Here in Hawaii, we will be the climate refugee capital of the Pacific unless we act now. So all these people living in more atolls, like islands closer to sea level, will need a place to go once their homes are underwater, and we may not have the resources for that. So that would be economically devastating. Secondly, the jobs in clean energy, in wind, solar, we've shown this already in Hawaii, where solar is cheaper than fossil fuels. They pay better and than the jobs in coal and fossil fuels. So it's all about guiding people to the light. And I think of the elites, they purposely try to pit like environmentalists and workers against each other because they know we're part of the same team. We're all progressive. So this is like a way to scapegoat and do that. But really, it's the corporate polluters that are causing these problems. And there's a win-win for workers and those who care about the environment. And I've never met somebody. I mean, like we blame systems, not people, right? And I never met a worker, whether they're in construction or even the folks building some of these pipelines, that don't care about the environment and clean air and water for their kids. We all want the same thing, and thankfully, it's definitely possible. There's better jobs outside of these failing industries that we're so trying so desperately to hold on to.
So you are a congressional candidate. You're attempting to move from state representative of Hawaii to Congress. You would be joining quite a few other Democrats, possibly taking the majority. How would you describe the Democrats' approach to environmental issues over the past, say, 10, 20 years?
I don't know how to describe it because I don't think they know how to describe it. It's been really, I think Michael Bloomberg tried to describe that, tried to say that like the solutions are coming from the private sector and not the government or not the people. But when you look at the private sector solutions that are proposed, trying to negotiate with utilities that their whole model of business is generating and selling power, that's not compatible with like rooftop solar or wind. So it's just, the incentives are all backwards. It's going to have to take bold action from from the people in our democracy. And just generally, I think that's the problem with the Democratic Party is people want bold progressive change. And clearly the Republicans, they're driving us backwards, but at least they know where the hell they're going. Like I feel like corporate Democratic leaders are just spinning their wheels, and they're afraid of big ideas because they're afraid of big donors. Yeah. So if we really want to see change in Congress, we need candidates, Democrats who don't take any money from fossil fuel.